Hey guys, welcome back to the Homestead Adventure. In today's episode, I will be teaching you how to start seeds indoors. So let's take a look at my setup here. I have just a wire shelving unit. It works very well for this. That way I can hang the lights directly from the wire, and I use some wires to hang it because when you're starting your seeds, you're going to put the light directly above your seed tray. The reason for this is if your seedlings are reaching too far for the light, they're going to get long and leggy, and therefore they're going to fall over. They won't be strong enough to survive. So you're going to want your lights at least 1 to 2 inches above the surface and no more than that. So I put mine about 1.5 inches above, and as the plants start growing, then you're going to be moving your light up so that it's about 1 inch from the top surface of the plant. So I recommend getting a wire shelving unit, or if you just have like a bookcase or something, just make sure that you can move your lights up and down. The next thing we have is our seed starting trays. So I use these plastic seed starting trays, and then I put them in one of these trays so that when the water drains out, it's not going to drip onto my floor. It's just going to drip right into this tray here. The reason why I prefer the plastic ones is, number one, I can reuse them every year, and so it's less of an investment than if you were to use the peat moss ones. Another reason I prefer the plastic ones is when I've used these ones in the past, they just tend to get a little moldy, and the reason why people like these ones is that you can cut each individual one off and just plant this right in the ground. But like I said, it's more of an investment because these are one-time use, and I can reuse these ones year after year after year. So let's talk more about lighting. I use shop lights. I get these from Menards. They're about $15 a piece. And then the bulbs are what really matters. So when you're looking for bulbs, you're going to be looking for 5100 to 6500 kelvins. I use 6500 Kelvin bulbs. That just means it's a daylight bulb. It's going to mimic the daylight. And when you're looking for lumens, you're going to be looking for anywhere from 2000 to 3000 lumens minimum. Mostly what I look for is the kelvins, because if you have a 6500 Kelvin bulb, you should be pretty set. It's going to mimic the color of the daylight. And I have had amazing success with the 6500 Kelvin bulbs. So when you're purchasing your lights, you're also going to be looking for the size of your bulbs. So these ones are a T8 bulb. So you've got T5, T8, and T12 are the most common sizes for bulbs. So make sure that you're getting the correct wattage as well. These are 32 watts. Each shop light should tell you how much wattage you need to use. So these are 32 watts, T8 bulbs, and 6500 kelvins. It didn't even tell me the lumens on them, and that didn't really matter as long as I had the kelvins right. So like I said, don't just go buy shop lights or take regular shop lights from your garage and try to start your seeds under it. You definitely need the proper amount of light, but also you do not need to go and purchase $50 grow lights. As long as you got your daylight bulbs, you should be good to go. A little more about lighting. You are going to want to keep your lights on for 15 to 18 hours a day. You can purchase timers that you plug your plug-in right into, and that will turn your lights on and off. But I've tried to use one, and it basically like almost started on fire. It didn't, my plug-in couldn't handle it for some reason. So I just turn mine on when I get up in the morning and turn it off when I go to bed at night. And that's usually enough light for them. So I'm going to take you over here and show you my lights. So these are my lights over here. Like I said, I use these wires so that I can lower or raise my lights when I need to. I put 2 side by side, so that way when my seeds are underneath them and I've got a whole tray going, these seeds over here aren't going to be reaching for light over there and vice versa. That way you got your light directly on top. I also use lights that just plug in. So I have these just plugged in to a plug-in over here. And I don't have the best setup for that right now, but I will be working on that and I might move them over here. We'll see about that. So when you're purchasing lights, when you're purchasing your shop lights, make sure that they're going to be able to plug in and they're not the wired kind. So let's turn these off for a minute and I can show you the bulbs and everything. So sorry, this is upside down, but it shows you the wattage and the 6,500 kelvins on there. We're good to go. And once I start filling these up as the season goes on, I will have almost all of these full and I will add lights as I go. Again, like I said, the shop lights were $15 at Menards and then the bulbs were about $3 a piece. So it's not a huge investment. So before we get started, you're going to need to purchase a seed starting mix. You're not going to be using just regular soil. You're not going to be using regular potting mix. You need it to say seed starter on it or seed starting mix. I usually go and get an organic one, but since it's so early in the season, I didn't have a lot of options. So this was all they had. Normally I would buy organic seed starter, but if this is all you got, go with what you can find. But as long as it says seed starting on it, it should be good to go. I also use a seed starting heat mat for my warm weather crops. So you don't need a heat mat for your cold weather ones. Cold weather crops actually like a little more of the cold weather when they germinate. Your warm weather ones are going to need a heat mat. This just helps the soil stay around 70 degrees. And you're not going to just purchase any heat mat because a lot of regular heat mats will get too hot. And you want it to stay a consistent temperature. And that's why I use a seed starting heat mat instead of just a regular heat mat. So I use this. I don't remember how much it costed. Maybe it was like $20 or $30 or something. I bought like 4 of them last year and I really only use 2 at a time because I do start my seeds at different times. So when I put my seeds in the seed starting tray, this all comes in one piece and I actually cut mine and label each section so I have like my basil in all of these so I don't have to label each individual one. This way I know that I have 4 basil plants here. Some will start growing faster than others and it helps when you cut them into sections to move them around because some will grow really tall and some will stay really short and you're going to need to adjust your lights accordingly. So that's why I cut mine and I label them. Remember to label them before you put your seeds in here because if you're putting all different seeds in here and then you try to label them, it can be hard to remember where you put everyone, especially if you're doing 36 of them at once. So cut them, label them if you wish. You don't have to cut them if you don't want to, but I recommend cutting them into sections so that you know this section is basil, this section is jalapenos, stuff like that. So now I'm going to show you how to actually plant those seeds. So if you're planting your cold weather crops outside, but you want to start them indoors for an early spring harvest. If you're planting something like, say, broccoli, and on the seed packet it says 80 to 89 days to harvest. That's about 2.5 to 3 months. So I'm going to go back and think, okay, when is my last frost date in the spring? When do I want to get these in the ground before it gets too hot? And after the last frost date or when it's going to be killed by a hard frost. So you're going to be thinking, okay, so if I want to harvest before it gets too hot, which is kind of end of June, beginning of July for me here in Wisconsin in Zone 5, then I'm going to be thinking, well, I should probably start my seeds mid-March so that I can harvest before it gets too hot. And also, you don't want to start them too early So your plants will get too big in their little starting pots, and then you'll have to repot them. So you want to make sure that you're not starting too early where you're going to have to keep repotting your plants, and you're not starting too late where your cold weather plants will get too hot in the summer. That also goes for your summer crops. You don't want to plant too early, and then especially if you're planting too early outside and it's too cold, you don't want to be repotting and replanting your plants. Tomatoes, for me, tomatoes and peppers are a bit of an exception to that rule. Just because they take so long to grow, I will be repotting them a little bit inside before I transplant them outside. For example, if you ever go to a nursery or your garden center and you see the big tomato plants, you're not going to be buying a little tomato plant this big. You want the big ones. So those you're going to want to start really early. So if you're planting, let's say, eggplant or okra that really needs those hot summers and they're grown over a long period, if you're planting too late or starting your seeds too late and you put them in the ground and they're still really tiny and you have a short growing season like I do, the frost is going to come before you're able to harvest them. So every plant has different needs. Every plant has different times that you're going to start them. And those times can be varied for different reasons, whether you want to get them out there before it gets too cold or before it gets too hot. So I know that can be a little confusing at first, but it really goes down to looking at your seed packet, figuring out how many days to harvest, whether it's a cool or warm weather crop, and when you will be planting in your growing zone. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about actually starting these seeds. So I'm going to take a little container here, and I'm going to take my seed starting mix. Okay. Oh, it smells so good. All right, so we're going to take our seed starting mix, and I'm going to put them directly into this container, because when you're starting your seeds, you're not going to want to put them in dry potting mix. You're going to want to moisten it up first, because if you're putting them in a dry mix and then you water it, your seedlings can go like straight down to the bottom, or they'll mix around and it's just going to be a big mess. So you really want to moisten your soil first. So I'm going to take some warm water for these, because these are my warm weather plants. And just going to put some in here and mix it around. You don't want it just sopping wet, and you don't want it too dry where it's just crumbly. You really want to, when you take a handful, it forms kind of a ball but doesn't just completely stick together. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Okay, I will show you though. You don't want it to be sopping where like if you pick it up, then it like oozes water out of it. No, you just want it to be able to kind of form a little ball and not just fall through your fingers. Just evenly moist is what we're looking for. So like this, you're going to pick it up, and it's just evenly moist. Not too dry, not too wet. So then we're going to put our moistened soil into our seed trays. So I might have told you this already, but I already labeled all of these. Like I said, I cut them and I labeled them. So after I put the seed starting mix in, I will put my seeds in and I will know where everything is. So when you're putting your seed mix in, you're going to not push it down like super packed down, but you want it firm enough where your seeds are going to stay where they were put and not sink down to the bottom. And you're going to go fairly close to the top. Some seeds will want to sit right on top, and some seeds will want to be buried just a little bit. So you're going to leave a little bit of room on the top, and I'm going to end up having to mix more of this. I don't have enough for all of my trays. So I'm going to keep putting the mix in here, keep mixing more up, and then we will plant our seeds. It's very, very important, like I said before, do not just go out and just get soil from your garden to start your seeds. You definitely need a seed starting mix because regular soil will not have all the nutrients your seed starts need. And I know it's confusing because when you're planting outside, you do just start in the soil if you're planting seeds, but indoors, they need a seed starting mix. All right, so now that we got these all full of starting mix, our next step is to plant. So I'm going to start with my peppers here. So I'm going to start with jalapenos. And so I'm going to find my packet. So on the seed packet, it should tell you the seed depth. So right here, it tells me that it's going to be 1/4 inch deep. So you're definitely going to want to know your seed depth because some seeds will like to just be sprinkled over the surface and some will want to be planted pretty deep. Things like peas will want to be planted 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep. Other things 1/4 inch deep, and some things just right on the surface or barely covered with soil. So our jalapenos are going to be 1/4 inch deep. And for each cell, I am going to put 2 to 3 seeds. And that way I can be sure that at least one of them will germinate. So I'm going to take this with my jalapeno label on there. I'm going to take 2 seeds and I'm going to put them into the soil about 1/4 inch deep. And I'm just going to cover just a little bit more so that I'm going to be sure that it's about 1/4 inch. I just like to do a couple extra seeds in each hole. That way, when it starts growing, then you're going to thin out your seedlings. So that means, so for each cell, for each one of these, since I did 2 to 3 seeds in each, it's going to pop out 2 to 3 plants. And then when they're about 1 inch tall, you're going to pick out the weaker plants and leave the one strongest one. And that is why we plant a couple extra, so that we can be sure we got a good, healthy, strong plant coming up. I'm going to put the rest of these back in the seed mix, or back in the seed packet. All right, so I got my jalapenos planted. And if your seed starting mix isn't moist enough, you're going to moisten the top just with a spray bottle. So here is my thyme seeds. So thyme seeds will be one of those that you will just sow on a flat surface. So let's find wherever my thyme was. Okay, that's these 2 here. And for a lot of your herbs, it's going to have really small, really, really tiny seeds. And I'm going to do, since thyme is one that just kind of grows in a big bundle, I'm just going to sow a bunch of these on top. So I'm just going to pinch it in my hand and sprinkle it over the surface. So things like thyme, oregano, and things like that that grow in clumps, you'll just be sprinkling some over the surface and just pat it down with your finger so that it sticks to the soil. And we're good to go. Just moisten the top. And that's it for that one. A lot of these that are surface sown like this, that are sprinkled over the top, they do just need some light to germinate, and that is another reason why we sprinkle it on top of the soil. And you're just going to pat it down or lightly cover it with soil. Okay, so for some of my seeds, the seed packet did not tell me how deep to plant them. So I had to look it up online, and you're going to want to do that if your seed packet does not tell you. And I have basil, and basil is also 1/4 inch. Basil has some smaller seeds, but these ones will not be sprinkled on top, even though they're small seeds. You're going to be thinning out your basil plants to 1 plant. So I'm going to do about 2 to 3 seeds. just like I did with my larger seeds. You can use seeds that you bought like last year. That's what a lot of these are right now, because I haven't really bought my seeds for the year. I'm just reusing some from last year. Well, not like reusing them, but like using seeds from packets that I bought last year. But the older your seeds are, the less germination rate you'll have. So germination rate is how many seeds actually sprout. So if you have seeds that are like 3 years or older, a lot of those are not going to be very good. So you really don't want to go past 3 years of saving seed packets. So I'd really love to get into actually saving my seeds from the previous year, like from my garden, actually saving those seeds. Things like peppers are really easy to save the seeds because they're right there. You just need to open it up, dry your seeds, and you can replant them next year. But so don't go be using 10-year-old seed packets. You want to start buying new seed packets or saving seeds from your plants every 2 years or so. All right, so now everything's planted. Just gonna water these, and we're gonna put them under the grow lights, and I'm gonna show you that setup over there. Okay, so now we are back at the seed starting station. So for your warm weather plants, I do have my seed starting mat under here. That's the heat mat that I showed you earlier. And I also have a cover on these, and that just helps kind of create a greenhouse effect for your warm weather crops when it is still cold out. So my house doesn't get very warm. We only have a pellet stove. We don't even have an actual furnace. So it gets pretty cold in here, and that way with the top on here, it's just going to help hold in the moisture and the heat from the heat mat and the lights, and that way my warm weather plants stay around 70 degrees in there. Every single day you're going to take the top off and you're going to spray the top with some water and make sure that everything is evenly moist, especially when you just planted and you're waiting for germination. It needs to stay evenly moist, because as soon as that soil gets dry, your plants are going to die. Again, spraying the top really helps, and that way if you're pouring water in there, it'll move around those little seedlings and it can uproot the roots as well. So it really helps to just spray it with a spray bottle. And that's basically it. So for your cold weather crops, which I'm not doing any today, it's too early for those, you are going to be, you're not going to need your heat mat. They don't like heat, so you're actually going to keep it cool, and you're not going to need this greenhouse effect with the top on. So you're just going to leave it. Without a top on. You're going to have the lights about an inch above the surface, and kind of treat it the same way. You're going to keep it evenly moist. Once your seedlings come up, you're going to thin back to one plant. And you're also going to be raising the lights as your seedlings start popping up and getting taller, because as soon as they start growing, they're going to grow right into the lights, and you're going to need to raise your lights a bit, and that's why I use wires. Also, when your seedlings start popping up, you are going, like I said, you're going to thin them out to one plant in each hole. And you're also going to want to mimic some wind. And doing that, you can use just a fan to put on these a couple hours a day. Or every time you water them, just run your hand along the tops of the leaves. And that way, it just creates stronger plants, because if you're mimicking the wind, then it's going to get used to that, and it's going to want to get stronger to help it stay up. And when you're hardening off, if you haven't done that and the wind is pushing those leaves, if you haven't been mimicking the wind, then it's going to be a little too weak to stay up. and it's going to fall right over. So going to mimic wind by running your hand over them every day while you're watering. Just kind of touch them or put a fan on them, or both. So let's talk a little bit about hardening off. So once your seedlings are about 1 inch, 2 inches tall, and it's time to put them outside. It's not too cold, not too hot, depending on whatever you are planting. When it's time to put them outside, you are going to take them in the actual tray and leave the tray outside for an hour, and then bring them back in and put them right back under your lights. And you're going to do that every day and slowly increase the time throughout the week. So it's going to be about 1 to 2 weeks that you're going to be hardening off your plants. And that way they just get acclimated to the temperatures outside, and it just helps them to be able to survive in the outside temperatures. So you're going to start with 1 hour a day and then slowly increase until, I usually go 1 hour one day and then slowly increase by like a half an hour to an hour each day until I'm ready to plant. So you're not going to want to keep them in your seed starting station and then put them right in the ground. Make sure that you're taking them outside, bringing them back in the actual seed starting tray for at least a week. One thing you do not want to do that a lot of people think is okay when starting seeds is just putting them in the windowsill and thinking that the sunlight from the windowsill is going to be enough. It is not. There's no direct overhead sunlight on those, and your little plants are going to be reaching for the sun, and they're just going to fall right over. So you really, really need the proper light. You need it no more than a few inches above the top of your plants. So to review, you're going to need 5100 to 6500 Kelvin light bulbs. Or if you want to go ahead and purchase grow lights, go ahead, but it's just a lot more expensive. And especially if you have a large garden and you use, like 20 lights like I do once the season gets really started, it can really add up. So 6500 Kelvin bulbs is what I use. Lumens, if you're looking for lumens, 2,000 to 3,000 lumens, but I mostly look for the Kelvins. Make sure that you get the right size bulbs for your light fixtures. Usually they're going to be T5, T8, or T12. I put 2 lights side by side so that it goes so that the whole tray gets light. If your plants start growing and they're getting too long, too leggy, make sure you put the light lower, and that should stop that. So you're looking for short, strong plants. You don't want them to be really tall. Basically all your plants, once they start germinating and they're about 1 inch tall, you want to make sure that they're short, stocky plants. Those are going to be your best plants. Make sure you're starting your seeds at the proper time. You're not starting too early, too late. And make sure you know your first and last frost date in your zone or your growing area. Make sure once they're growing, you're mimicking the wind and you're thinning back to 1 plant per cell. And warm weather plants get the heat mat, and if you want, you can put a cover on. You don't absolutely have to, but if it stays really cold in your house, you're going to want this at least until they germinate. Make sure you're watering every single day. Don't drown your plants, but also don't let them get too dry. Another thing that I forgot to mention is when you're starting your seeds, you don't want to start them in a large pot. Even if you're going to have them as potted plants, you definitely want to start them in a small starting trays. These ones are even a little bit big. They even have smaller ones. So if you are starting seeds such as, like I'm starting my tomatoes and peppers really early, I will be repotting those a couple of times before I put them outside, because by the time I put them outside, I'm hoping that they'll be like this big. And so they're not going to stay in these seed trays. Most of your plants that you're going to be putting outside just go straight from the seed trays into the ground after hardening it off, of course. And that is basically it. I don't think I missed anything. Again, make sure that your seed starting mix is a seed starting mix, not just potting mix, not just soil, because it's going to need the proper nutrients. I know it seems a little weird that when you're starting seeds indoors and when you're starting them outdoors, it's a little bit different, because outdoors just need the sunlight, they just need the soil. But starting indoors, they just need a little bit extra care, because this is an artificial environment. It's not the same. So that's basically it for starting your seeds indoors. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you on the next adventure. Bye, guys.